For the better part of 60 years, the Omega Speedmaster has been one of the most popular, one of the most influential, one of the most in demand, one of the watches that Omega's kind of has their cornerstone on. I mean, this thing is iconic. You know, when you hear the Omega Speedmaster, what you think about is the Moonwatch, but the history runs even before that when it was considered a Moonwatch. So, you know, this watch I'm reviewing here is my personal watch. I bought this thing back in 2016 while I was traveling overseas, and you know, it's been my workhorse. Actually, probably half workhorse. I work quite a bit to work in other places, but yeah, it's just performed flawlessly. I usually wear it on this Omega strap that you see here, so yeah, it's just comfortable. I have to clean every once in a while, which is kind of expected with a NATO, but you can't really beat the looks, the package. Just I think it's just a great size overall. So history-wise, the Omega Speedmaster has been around before it went to the moon. First released in 1957, the Speedmaster was referenced CK2915, and what that was, it has a caliber 321 movement, which is super rare nowadays. If you have one of those, it's worth a small fortune. Broad arrow. So what broad arrow is, I mean, literally looks like an arrow. If you think of a Rolex GMT and kind of a 24-hour hand on the GMT, that's the point and what it looked like. You know, the next iteration off of that was the CK2998. And that CK2998, at least in modern terms, you know, Omega and I think a lot of watch manufacturers, you know, nowadays are going back to homages and kind of going back to the roots to figure out and try to market and try to sell watches that will move, because, you know, let's face it, you know, we're kind of in this vintage boom right now. You see a lot for a lot of your main manufacturers, but you also see in the current offerings that have come out at various events such as Basel and SIHH and whatever else it may be. You know, I guess what's the correct term there? Almost like patinaed hands that are fake patina. You know, watches that go back to kind of the original dials with a very, very slight difference. You know, Omega, for instance, just came out with the 1957 trilogy series to pay homage to the first Omega ever to come out. But you're seeing this quite a bit. The CK2998 came out in 1959. The case size jumped from 39 to 40 millimeters, which is it's not bad. I think in modern terms, 40 millimeters is considered kind of the sweet spot, maybe a little bit too small. But you know, back in the 50s and 60s, you know, 40 millimeter was pretty big. I understand as a tool watch, I mean, that was kind of expected, but you know, back then that was a pretty big watch. The next pretty important iteration here, at least pays the DNA to this watch you see right here, is going to be the reference 105002. So that 105002 was released in 1962. And the big difference there was it came with straight hands. So the Moonwatches you see nowadays, and pretty much a lot of the ones you see even for sale in the secondary market, are going to have these straight hands. So if you notice, the minute and hour marker, and also the registers here all have straight hands. And you know, that's a big difference, right? So the CK2998 had alpha hands. In fact, what an alpha hand is it comes to a point. You know, if you look at a Shira. If you go online and search, you know, CK2998 Shira or the original CK2998, you'll see what I'm talking about. But very, very different than what you see here. Excuse me. Now, with that in mind, with the straight hands, the kind of next iteration that, you know, forms the true DNA, meaning, you know, pretty much pound for pound, what you see in the current watches that are out is going to be the 105, I believe it's 105012, which came out in 1963, and then the 105013, which I believe was the year afterwards. That was kind of, you know, the watch you see here. So Lyra Lugs, and what Lyra Lugs are, if you see right here, they're beveled, they're kind of stepped. They almost have this like sculpted shape to it. You know, the watches before that had a very, very flat lug. I mean, it's essentially like, if you think of a Rolex lug, it is like dead flat. This is not a flat lug. It's sculpted, it has almost 3 facets. And the big difference is now these things protrude out a little bit and cover up both the winding mechanism here, or sorry, not winding mechanism, but the crown, and then also the chronograph pushers. So the ones before that, you know, the dead giveaway on the street, that you'll see from a pre-moon, which is, you see a lot of times FOIS or First Omega in space, but generally called pre-moon. And the Moonwatch, the way you can tell is because of the Lyra lug and how it sticks out and covers up your chronograph buttons and also the crown. Oh god, I forgot there for a second. My apologies. The size also jumped to 42 millimeters. It was also the first time you saw professional on the dial. Watches before that did not have the professional kind of printed on the dial. So jumping into this, just absolutely beautiful watch. 42 millimeters. When you look at the width of the lugs, it's 20 millimeters. So if you want to go shopping for a NATO strap, the one you're going to look for is 20 millimeters. Sits well on the wrist. If I could put on real quick, as somebody who used to daily wear Panerais quite a bit, I'm big into historic, right? I'm big into vintage. I'm big into manual wind movements. Just my personality in general since I was a kid was tactile sensations and also just a homage to how stuff used to be done in the past. I think every watch I own, actually every watch I own right now, has a manual wind movement. And for me, automatic doesn't really do anything for me. I like winding this thing when it runs out of power. I like every single morning setting the time. I think it's something that's almost a ritual. Same reason why I like, making coffee by hand still. And for me, it's not a time thing. It's just it's kind of a toy. But sits well on the wrist, 42 millimeters. I'll review my Panerai later on. You'll see a huge difference in both the thickness and size. But really comfortable, no complaints. I believe the thickness is 14 millimeters, I want to say. Pretty sure that's the case, but yeah, 14 millimeters. Houses movement 1861. So 1861 is, literally the exact same thing as the 861s. And what the 861 was the movement that replaced the 321. I need to double check, but I'm pretty certain that it's the exact same movement, except the 861 has almost like a copper type finish on the movement when you look at it. This one is finished a little bit better. But if I take it off real quick, there you go. As somebody who's owned, Longas in the past and other, much higher end watches than this, this is a steal. The finishing is never going to rival what you see in a Patek or something like that, but for the price point, you really can't beat it. The build quality is great. One thing I do love about this is when you start and stop the chronograph, it is like dead solid, no play, and I'm pretty sure you can hear it on the video. Yep, real loud. So 3 registers, one here on the left, next to my left thumbnail is going to be seconds, which is just a continuously running off-center second hand. The one here on the right is going to be the minute counter up to 30 minutes. And the one here on the bottom is hours up to 12 hours. So hypothetically, you could run this chronograph for 12 hours, 29 minutes and 59 seconds, and the next second after that, all the hands will pretty much reset. But, I would never run it for that long because you'd run the power down, but for doing some things, where I don't want to pull my phone out, let's say use my stopwatch, I use this thing quite a bit and it's pretty much dead on. So, really beautiful movement. One thing I do love about this watch is I believe back in 2013, maybe 2014, Omega redid their offering on this watch where in my personal opinion, the boxes beforehand that Omega packaged their watches in were, in my opinion, pretty half-assed. Not great, just kind of almost cheap. I think with a lot of their watches, they still kind of do that today, but with the Speedmaster, it's almost like a suitcase now. You open up the suitcase and there's a Velcro strap, a bracelet, which I probably only wore a couple times, and then this NATO strap that I wear quite a bit. Actually, I've had this thing on the NATO strap since I returned from Europe when I bought this watch, so it's been over a year actually. But really comfortable. The full set, they just hit it out of the park. Comes with a loop, and I mean, just it's awesome. You know, I have no complaints. I honestly don't. I mean, it's just a fantastic watch. And you know, when you ask 95% of people what their top 5 watch collection would be if they could pick 5, you know, your enthusiasts, pretty much 95% of them are going to say, you know, at least one of the watches is going to be a Speedmaster. You know, and that's all to say when you think about all different offerings out there, the different price points, and the fact that this thing pretty regularly you can find at the kind of $3,500 price point brand new is saying quite a bit.